On a summer night in 1960, four teenagers went camping by the peaceful shores of Lake Bodom in Finland. Only one would live to see the sunrise. The brutal attack that unfolded in those dark hours would become Finland's most notorious unsolved murder, and decades later, the lone survivor would find himself standing trial for the deaths of his friends. What really happened that night by the lake? The answers remain as murky as Bodom's dark waters. Into the Unknown presents the Lake Bodom Murders. To understand the full impact of what happened that fateful night in 1960, we need to first understand Finland in the early 1960s. The country was still recovering from the aftermath of World War II, rebuilding its identity and infrastructure. The small town of Espoo, where Lake Bodom is located, was a quiet community where serious crimes were rare. The local police force had little experience with major criminal investigations, a fact that would prove crucial in the hours and days following the murders. On Saturday, June 4, 1960, four teenagers decided to take advantage of the mild summer weather for a weekend camping trip. Mila Irmeli Bjorklund and Anja Tuulikki-Maki, both 15 years old, were close friends who had recently started dating two 18-year-old boys, Niels Wilhelm Gustafsson and Seppo Antero Boisman. The young couples represented typical Finnish youth of their era, hardworking students looking forward to their future in the increasingly prosperous nation. Mila Bjorklund was known for her vivacious personality and academic achievements. She had met Niels Gustafsson at a local youth club, and their relationship had blossomed over several months. Anja Maki was more reserved but equally well-liked, particularly for her artistic talents and kind nature. She and Seppo Boisman had been dating for only a few weeks. Seppo was an apprentice metalworker with dreams of opening his own business, while Niels worked at a local factory but harbored ambitions of pursuing higher education. The teenagers arrived at Lake Bodom in the late afternoon, cycling from their homes with camping equipment and supplies strapped to their bicycles. They chose a spot approximately 100 meters from the shoreline in a small clearing that offered both privacy and a spectacular view of the lake. Multiple witnesses would later report seeing the group setting up their tent and gathering firewood, noting nothing unusual about their behavior or the surrounding area. The campsite they selected was a popular spot among local youth, known for its scenic views and relative seclusion. It was close enough to the road to be accessible, but far enough into the woods to feel adventurous. The teens set up their modest tent, a simple canvas structure that would later become the focal point of one of Finland's most notorious crime scenes. According to later police reports, the group spent the evening like any other young campers. They built a campfire, cooked sausages, and shared stories. A few passing hikers noticed their campfire around 9 p.m., and one even stopped briefly to chat with the group. This witness would later describe them as being in high spirits, laughing, and enjoying their evening together. No one could have predicted the horror that would unfold in the early hours of the following morning. The last known sighting of the group alive was around 11 p.m. when a local fisherman passed by their campsite. He reported seeing the teens preparing for bed, their campfire dying down to embers. The weather that night was mild but cloudy, with a light breeze coming off the lake, typical conditions for a Finnish summer evening. What happened in the next few hours remains one of criminology's most debated mysteries. Between 4 o'clock and 6 a.m. on June 5th, someone approached the tent with murderous intent. The attack that followed was not just violent, it was savage, methodical, and deeply personal in its execution. The killer or killers never entered the tent. Instead, they struck through the canvas walls with both a knife and an unidentified blunt object, possibly a stone or hammer. This unusual method of attack has puzzled investigators for decades. Was it a sign of the perpetrator's psychological state? A tactical decision to prevent the victims from identifying their attacker? Or perhaps a way to ensure none of the teenagers could escape? The violence inflicted was extreme. Mila Bjorklund suffered the most severe injuries, multiple stab wounds to her chest and face, with such force that the medical examiner would later state that the attack seemed to indicate overwhelming rage. Her facial injuries were so severe that initial identification had to be made through dental records. This level of overkill, particularly focused on one victim, suggested to many investigators that Mila may have been the primary target. Anja Maki and Seppo Boisman were also killed in the attack, though their injuries, while fatal, were less extensive than Mila's. Both had been stabbed multiple times and struck with the blunt object, causing massive internal injuries. The positioning of their wounds suggested they had tried to shield themselves from the attacks, indicating they had been at least partially awake when the assault began. Niels Gustafsson, the sole survivor, sustained severe injuries but somehow lived through the ordeal. His injuries included a broken jaw, fractured facial bones, and a concussion. He was found lying partially outside the tent, leading to decades of speculation about his role in the events. Was he truly a victim who miraculously survived, or was there more to his story? The crime scene that greeted investigators on the morning of June 5th was unlike anything Finnish law enforcement had encountered before. The tent was soaked in blood, with the canvas walls shredded from the attack. The victims' belongings were scattered across the campsite in what appeared to be a deliberate pattern rather than random disarray. Several peculiar details about the crime scene would go on to fuel decades of speculation and conspiracy theories. The victims' possessions had been handled in markedly different ways. Some items were missing entirely, while others had been carefully arranged on top of the bodies. Among the missing items were keys, a knife that may have belonged to one of the boys, and several pieces of clothing. The investigation was hampered from the start by several critical factors. Heavy rain in the early morning hours had washed away crucial evidence, including footprints and potential blood trails. The crime scene was also contaminated by curious onlookers who gathered at the lake before police could properly secure the area. In 1960s Finland, proper crime scene protocols were still in their infancy, and many basic forensic procedures we take for granted today were not followed. One of the most significant witness accounts came from a group of boys who had been birdwatching near the lake early that morning. They reported seeing a blond man in his 20s or 30s walking away from the direction of the campsite. The man was described as wearing bright red clothing that appeared to be wet and stained dark in places. Despite this seemingly crucial lead, the mysterious figure was never identified. Carl Valdemar Gillström emerged as one of the first serious suspects in the case. Known locally as Kioski Valdemar, he ran a kiosk near Lake Bodom and had a reputation for aggressive behavior toward campers. Multiple witnesses reported seeing him washing bloody clothes in the lake on the morning after the murders. He was known to chase away campers from the area with violent threats, and several locals later claimed he had bragged about the murders while drinking. Gillström's potential involvement took a dark turn when he drowned in Lake Bodom in 1969. His death was ruled a suicide, but before dying, he reportedly made several cryptic statements about the murders to his wife. She would later tell investigators that he had suffered from guilt and nightmares about the events at the lake, though she never directly accused him of the murders. The case took another intriguing turn with the emergence of Hans Assmann as a suspect. Assmann was a German national with alleged KGB connections living in the Helsinki area. On the morning after the murders, he arrived at a Helsinki hospital wearing bloody clothes and exhibiting strange behavior. Despite this suspicious timing, he was never seriously investigated at the time. Some researchers have suggested this was due to his potential intelligence connections and the political climate of the Cold War era. The investigation continued sporadically through the decades, with various teams of detectives reviewing the evidence as forensic science advanced. DNA analysis was attempted on surviving pieces of evidence in the 1990s, but the results were inconclusive due to degradation and contamination of the samples. Perhaps the most dramatic development in the case came in 2004, when police arrested Niels Gustafsson, the attack's sole survivor, and charged him with the murders. The arrest came after years of renewed investigation and advanced analysis of the surviving evidence. Prosecutors built their case around several key points that had troubled investigators for decades. They argued that Gustafsson's injuries, while serious, were notably different from those of the other victims. Medical experts testified that his wounds could have been self-inflicted or sustained during the commission of the murders. The prosecution suggested that Gustafsson had flown into a jealous rage after seeing his girlfriend, Mila, with Seppo Boisman. This theory would explain the particularly brutal nature of Mila's injuries and the somewhat less severe wounds inflicted on the others. The trial that followed was one of the most high-profile criminal cases in Finnish history. The prosecution presented evidence suggesting that blood spatter patterns were inconsistent with Gustafsson's account of events. They also highlighted inconsistencies in his statements over the years and brought forward witnesses who claimed he had exhibited violent tendencies in his youth. However, Gustafsson's defense team mounted a compelling counter-argument. They brought in their own forensic experts who demonstrated that it would have been virtually impossible for someone with Gustafsson's injuries to have carried out the attacks. They also highlighted the numerous witness sightings of the mysterious blonde man in red clothing, arguing that these accounts completely contradicted the prosecution's theory. After a trial that lasted several months and captured national attention, Gustafsson was acquitted in 2005. The court ordered the state to pay him substantial compensation for wrongful accusation and imprisonment. The acquittal left investigators back at square one, with no clear suspects, and most of the original evidence degraded beyond usefulness. The Lake Bodom murders had a profound impact on Finnish society and law enforcement. The case led to significant reforms in how serious crimes were investigated and documented. It also sparked a national conversation about youth safety and public security that resonated through the decades. The case has left an indelible mark on popular culture. The Finnish metal band Children of Bodom, which achieved international success, took their name from the murders. The case has inspired numerous books, documentaries, and even horror films, each attempting to make sense of the senseless violence that occurred that night. The enduring mystery of Lake Bodom has given rise to countless theories over the years. Some investigators believe the killer was a local who knew the area well, explaining the ability to approach the tent undetected and escape without leaving clear tracks. Others suggest it might have been a random act of violence by a transient killer who was never caught. The arrangement of the victims' belongings remains one of the most puzzling aspects of the case. Why would a killer take the time to carefully place certain items on the bodies while taking others? This detail has led some researchers to suggest the involvement of multiple perpetrators, one driven by violence, the other exhibiting more ritualistic behavior. The method of attack, striking through the tent rather than entering it, continues to generate debate among criminal psychologists. Some suggest it indicates a perpetrator who wanted to maintain psychological distance from their victims, while others argue it was a tactical decision to prevent escape or identification. Today, Lake Bodom appears peaceful, its waters revealing nothing of the tragedy that occurred on its shores. The case files remain open, but with most of the original investigators now deceased and critical evidence lost to time, the chances of resolving this mystery grow increasingly remote. The Lake Bodom murders stand as a testament to the limitations of criminal investigation and the sometimes arbitrary nature of justice. 4 young people went camping by those placid waters, full of hopes and dreams for their futures. Only one would leave alive, carrying with him questions that would haunt Finland for generations. The case reminds us that some mysteries resist all attempts at resolution, leaving us only with questions that echo across the decades. What really happened that night by Lake Bodom? Was it a crime of passion, a random act of violence, or something even more sinister? Perhaps these questions will never be answered, becoming part of the dark legacy of one of criminology's most enduring mysteries. If you want to explore more unsolved mysteries, true crime cases, and unexplained phenomena, make sure to subscribe to Into the Unknown. Every Monday and Friday, we delve into another fascinating case that challenges our understanding of human nature and justice. Hit that subscribe button now to join our growing community of mystery enthusiasts, and don't forget to ring the notification bell to stay updated on our latest uploads. Until next time, remember, some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, they're meant to be shared.